Welcome back to the Female Dating Strategy, the meanest female-only dating podcast on the internet. I'm your host, Diana.
And I am Rose. And today we have Diana introducing us to the second half of our series on the zodiac and our astrological signs. As we wrap up the year, just some reminders to be true to who we are, to embrace the inherent essence of our natures, and to be as strategic as possible when taking them into account as we brave this whole new world of dating.
Mm-hmm. And so last time we covered the signs Pisces to Leo, and this week we're going to cover the signs Virgo to Aquarius. And I think that there's no better sign to start with than Virgo, because paying attention to the details is a bit of a Virgo specialty.
Ooh.
And yeah. Virgo is an earth sign. It is ruled by the planet Mercury. And Gemini is also ruled by Mercury, but the expression of Gemini and Virgo are very different. So where Gemini is like a social chatterbox who gathers information through communicating with other people, Virgo does a lot through observation. And so I think us women can learn a lot from Virgo, because Virgo is one of those signs that really does pay attention to the details and has a very high standard for themselves in general. Most of the Virgos I know are very meticulous about the things that they want and like in life. They have very, very particular taste. They can be very hypercritical. Oh, you know what? Like most of the people you know who are spectacular at their craft sometimes are Virgos. Like Michael Jackson was a Virgo. Beyonce is a Virgo. Zendaya, I believe, is a Virgo. You know, all of these like high achieving people who want their shit done a specific way, most likely they're a Virgo.
Interesting. I'm just looking at the dates again. So Virgo is born between...
It'll usually be late August to like early September.
Okay.
So I would say it's probably like August 25th-ish, I'm going to guess. Something like the 20-something sign. So like August 25th, August 24th probably to September 23rd, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's saying August 23rd to September 22nd. You're right on. I'm just wondering, I'm looking through my contacts of like who my friends are, because I write down all of their birthdays because I hate to miss a birthday. And nope, that's the one who I thought would be a Virgo. It's actually born January 20th. I have a question for you, Diana, because you're talking like you have a lot of Virgos in your life. Like, can you give me an example of one or two of them and how you were like, this person is clearly a Virgo?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, like all of the constellations in the zodiac are usually connected to Greek and Roman mythology, mainly Roman, but like their origin is obviously Greek. So in Virgo, it represents the Virgin Maiden. And it represents Astrea, who was the last god to flee Olympus, I think, or she fled the earth for Olympus, I believe. And also sometimes in Roman mythology, she's associated with Demeter, who is the goddess of the harvest and autumn. So yes, she's represented by Astrea, who was the last immortal to abandon Earth at the end of the Silver Age when the gods fled to Olympus, which is why Virgo is associated with the Earth. And so Virgo people, like I think last time we spoke, I talked about how there are three different energies depending on whatever sign you are. So there's fixed, there's cardinal, and there's mutable. And if you have to think about it in a life cycle, a cardinal sign is the sign that begins everything. The fixed sign is the sign that maintains everything. And the mutable sign is the thing that ends everything and starts a new project. So Virgo shares that with three other signs. So Virgo, I believe Sagittarius, and Pisces. I think Pisces is also a mutable sign. So they have a certain flexibility to them that is kind of unusual for the Earth. Also, they share a planet with Gemini, and that planet is Mercury. So they kind of have the kind of flexibility that Gemini is traditionally associated with, but they use it in a very different way. So where Gemini needs to be around people, most Virgo people I meet are quite comfortable not having to be around them, I know a lot of introverted Virgos, let me put it that way. Even if they're very social people, they tend to recharge their energy by being on their own. They're very focused on, they're the kind of person where like, if you did a class project at school, they'd be so tired of how fucking stupid everyone is and just end up doing it themselves and wind up with the best grades in class because they can trust themselves. They can trust themselves and they know that when they do something, they'll get the work done. They are finicky and they're picky. They do not like people who hold them back from achieving their potential. They are concerned with details. They're concerned with the specificity of details. The way that they analyze information is very different from the way that Gemini analyzes information, because Gemini is all about learning that information through communicating with other people. But Virgos do a lot of things by observation. They catch a lot of stuff about other people just by watching them and observing them. And so most Virgo people I know, I'm not saying that they're all introverted, obviously, but they tend to be people who are very analytical, people who are, they observe the smaller things, they pay attention to the finer details. And they are usually a good person to have on projects because they care about these things. They care about, like, if you are the kind of person who takes a macro look at everything and you're like, okay, this is more or less good, like this works, a Virgo is going to look at like those tiny things that you overlooked, and that's where they're going to focus on to help improve things. Like even their criticism, they're not concerned with making you feel bad. They're just concerned with doing it right. And I think that's something that people need to remember about them is that whenever they do criticize you, it's usually not coming from a personal space. They just are used to doing that to themselves. I think that Virgos can be very self-critical. I think they can be very hypercritical. And an insecure Virgo is someone who was going to, project that on other people.
So I was just going to ask, like, let's use this in the context of the dating realm. What are some of the advantages to this sort of personality, and what are some areas in which they might need to learn to be more aware or be more adaptable than they might prefer?
You know what? I will say I have met a lot of Virgos who are very good at pointing out the flaws in other people and other people's dating lives, but have a huge blind spot with their own dating lives. Because I have a friend and she's very good about like analyzing the men that come into my life and being like, oh my God, this guy is terrible for X, Y, and Z reason. Like she won't sugarcoat it. You know what I mean? She'll be like, he's terrible. And like, she's also the person who listens to this podcast regularly and gives me genuine feedback. Like she's, dedicated to helping me improve.
Thanks, friend.
Yeah, definitely. They are people you can count on to give you honesty when it comes to whether you're underperforming. But they can have a blind spot with their own selves, because I think that that's like, I don't know whether, I think we all have that blind spot. You could be somebody, like we have like a certain sense of clarity with other people that we don't necessarily have with ourselves, right?
I mean, I guess that's kind of human nature is what I'm thinking about. Like, from a distance, we're all able to see a little more clearly, but when it's up right in front of our face, things just tend to be a little blurrier.
Yeah, you know what? Most of the times when I have seen an artist that I'm really into, they always manage to be Virgos. They have like a very impeccable sense of style. And I don't just mean that like fashionably. I mean that like they have a distinctiveness to their craft and the way that they approach problems in life that are very them. Like they care a lot about, people call them perfectionists a lot of the times. And that's part of the reason why they put a lot of pressure on themselves. But I think that like they could use that perfectionism for good and use it with the men in their lives. I think that Virgos have the capacity to be very discerning when they need to be. But I don't know why. Like anytime I've met a Virgo woman, she's always with like such a shitty guy. And I'm like, why don't you use all this hypercritical perfectionism in your favor? You know what I mean? Like use it on him.
Use your powers for good. Yes.
Use your powers for good. Like, instead of paying attention to what everybody else is doing, why don't you pay attention to your own damn life and pay attention to the ancient man in your life and throw him out with the perfectionism that you are accustomed to, Do that.
Oh, it is so hard. It's so hard. And I think we've all been there. And this is something that I was just talking about this with one of my oldest friends yesterday. She's a high school sweetheart that they married, right after they finished college. And they've had a very difficult and tumultuous relationship because he's been alcoholic their entire relationship. And recently he got into legal issues with it. And so he's currently at a facility for rehab, which I'm very proud of him for doing this. And I couldn't be happier for their family. But what was interesting was that my bestie was saying, like, I went to some of these Al-Anon meetings that I've been encouraging her to go to for a very long time, Alateen as well for her daughters. But it's really having people deal with, the illness of codependency and how enabling addiction is part of this dysfunctional pattern that happens, this dysfunctional system that props up and supports, the addict. And she was like, I've just been learning so much. And, all this time I've just been blaming him and, just thinking that if he would just get this problem fixed up, like everything would be fine. And she's like, and I never looked at my own self. And he said to me before, like, well, I'm going to rehab, but like, what are you doing? What are you changing in your life? It can't just be me. And she's like, and I listened to him, but I didn't really hear him. And now from starting to go to these meetings, I'm starting to understand like there's so much I need to be changing in my own life. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a huge revelation for you. So many people will go through their whole lives without ever once stopping and asking, like, is the problem me? Am I the problem as well as the solution? It's so easy to point the finger and to look and to analyze and nitpick over every detail. And this is what I was saying to her was like, this is what therapy really made clear to me was, all this time I was involved with a very abusive and dysfunctional family. And if my sister would just do this, and if my brother would do that, and if my mom wouldn't do this, it was all of these ways in which I wanted everybody else to be different and act differently. And it was really only through therapy that I came to realize like the only control I have is over my own actions and my own responses to situations. And that was really, really started to like grow up and take responsibility for my own life instead of just being a victim of circumstances.
Yes, yeah. And I think that, that's where the fine line has to be drawn, because I think that, you mentioned nitpicky. Nitpicky is something I think a lot of Virgo people can be. I think that, when it is destructive and when it is not productive is when it's either extremely self directed. I think Virgo people can be their own harshest critics. They have to sometimes chill it and cool it with the extreme criticism. I think it's very hard for some of them to practice compassion for themselves just because they do have such a high standard for themselves. But, I think that's something that Virgo people have to watch out for with their own selves is the thing that you're being hypercritical about or hyperfixating on, is it something that is actually helping you, or is it something that's just making you feel like shit about yourself?
You know what, Diana? You're actually making me wonder if maybe, you were saying that like Virgos are really good at pointing out to others what's going on and what's wrong with their relationship. But it almost makes me wonder if this is like if they're so hyper critical of themselves, maybe in their own minds, they're saying, well, I shouldn't be as critical of my partner because, I can't live up to my own standards. So remember, it's the sort of thing where you're like, well, I'm not perfect. So I should just love whoever loves me. And maybe it's that same attitude.
I had a college friend who was a Virgo, and she broke up her engagement last year. And so she's like single right now, and she's actually going to come to my city. And I haven't seen her in years. Okay. So obviously, I was just doing like, I haven't spoken to her in a few years. I haven't seen her in a few years. So like, we do these like random catch ups where like it's just like, messaging on Instagram and stuff. But like, she's going to be in my town for like a wedding. And so she's just going to crash with me for a couple of days. But, we got talking about her life. And she was like, oh yeah, I just wasn't in like the space where I'm ready to be in another big relationship with someone, just because she had been with that person for a really long time, and she thought that they were going down this path of marriage and stuff, and obviously that didn't happen. And then she was like, well, like just to be very clear and like have my cards on the table, I am in like a polyamorous situation. And immediately I was like, no, no. Like I was like, oh, thank God I wasn't sitting in front of her and it was on a phone call, because I would not have been able to disguise my disappointment.
Oh no, yes.
And like her whole excuse for it was like, oh, I'm not really looking for anything like seriously committed. And I was like, I mean, you can be in a monogamous dating situation with a person and still not be seriously committed. You know what I mean? Like the level of commitment should be proportional to the level of effort that like this person is putting and investing in you. And I didn't sugarcoat my feelings about that situation, because I said, frankly, I think it's a situation where men get women they don't deserve, and they have too much access to women that they don't deserve. I've very rarely seen a man who's emotionally mature enough to be able to handle the emotional needs of one woman, let alone 2, 3, 4, or 5.
Very valid. Very valid. Absolutely.
So that's just me being straight up plain, right? And this is a person who can be so discerning and so particular about all these other aspects of her life. But in this particular aspect, she's blind. And I do think that, yes, I agree with you. It comes from being like, well, I am so critical. Is it really that fair to be critical of someone else because I'm not perfect? But I will tell you, lots of Virgos don't struggle with thinking they're not perfect. Sometimes a lot of them have the impression that they're the only people with the right ideas and they're the only people with the right perspectives.
That's got to be a tough row to hoe as a person.
Some humility is required as well. And this is coming from a Leo. Okay, so take it with a grain of salt.
Honestly, I feel like there are many people who would do better to embrace a little more ego death. And I say this right as a Pisces who's like had a million ego deaths because I just I'm too quick to look to myself as the root of all problems, and maybe more than I need to. Honestly,
it is a balance. It's always a balance.
It is a balance, right? It's like the sun and the moon, right?
Yep. It's the balance between knowing when to be discerning and knowing when to be proud of yourself. It is the balance between knowing when to be confident and when to be humble. and both of these things are equally important, and and the strategy behind using them correctly is really a life skill that will benefit you in life. But it's something that is learned from experience. Life will humble you. If you make terrible choices with men, life will humble you. Sometimes life will fucking kill you, because if you spend time with the wrong man, you may not survive it. So this is why discernment is very important, and I don't think that discernment is something that Virgo people struggle with. I think that they just feel sometimes maybe that they can't apply a lot of their expectations onto other people. I will say, Virgo, you can expect whatever you want from men. I honestly think you need to pull in that Beyonce energy, not with the relationship front, because God knows. See, look, Beyonce is a great example of this, because she's so perfect about her career, but look at what she is with her man. You know what I mean? So I do think that there is some benefit in like learning to use that energy in not just your career, but also use it for the men in your life, because you know what? That's the time where you should be a bit of a perfectionist. I will say, Leo people, I think sometimes having a big ego helps us, because like the second a man loses interest in me and he's not willing to treat me the way he was in the beginning, I get bored. I get hella bored and I throw him away. Back with the other peasants. Out you go.
And I'm always listening avidly to every little morsel from your Leo lips, Diana. So that's Virgo. And then who do we move on to next?
Then we move on to the Venusians, who are Libra.
Oh my gosh, yay! Almost all my best friends have ended up being Libras somehow. I don't like on every continent when I hit it off with somebody, they inevitably end up being a Libra. Why is that?
Well, you know what? I'm a Libra moon, so I can explain. Libras are the Minnesotans of the zodiac. They are everybody's best friend.
No wonder that makes so much sense.
They are best friends with everyone.
They're the Minnesotans of the zodiac.
So Libra is ruled by the planet Venus, and it shares that planet with the sign Taurus. But where Taurus has to do with material pleasure and sensual pleasure, Libra has to do with like charisma and communication and harmony, and just Libras are people who maintain the peace, and that is why they are represented by the scale, because they're all about balance. They're all about moderation. They're all about not having that extreme of an opinion and being very fair-minded. The downside of this sometimes is that they can come across as people pleasers. They may fight too hard to maintain the peace at a time when they might need to have a solid stance on something. But in general, you can count on them to be people who are not going to churn up a lot of conflict, they have a preference for harmony. Libras, I will say, Libra girls are a bit like Leos. We care about looks, huh? We're not shallow. I mean, we're super shallow. We're super shallow. Libra girls will look at the face and then they will forget everything else. So if I had to give Libra girls advice, I'm like, he can't just be pretty. He has to do something else, Being pretty is not a personality trait.
Yeah, it's no indication of character.
Yes, I think that's our weakness.
We all, who doesn't appreciate a beautiful man, right? I mean, it's so rare that you find one, honestly.
Yeah, Libra definitely appreciates a beautiful man, because they're ruled by Venus. They're ruled by the planet of beauty. So, they care about aesthetics. They care about the guy and the way he looks. They are not going to be with a sloppy man. They're not going to be with someone who looks hideous. That flannel and the turned back baseball cap, that is not a vibe for them.
FDS girlies, let us learn from our Libra friends, okay? Because this whole like cargo shorts, backward cap wearing, ill-fitted t-shirt that has stains on it, like are these men toddlers? Why are they dressing like toddlers? And I would be dressing my toddler better than these men dress, honestly.
I know. There's some well-dressed toddlers out there, but it's giving very Luke from Gilmore Girls energy, that kind of like, I don't care about my looks, I'm ruggedly handsome. No, sir, you're just lazy. That has nothing to do with ruggedness. If anything, it's proving the opposite. It's convincing me there's nothing rugged about you, because you can't even think about what you want to put on your own body that day. Like, you're that lazy. I don't think you're off chopping lumber. You know what I mean? I just think you haven't had to make these decisions for yourself since the last woman, i.e. your mother, had to do it for you. So no, it's not that sexy to me. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh. Actually, the most rugged man I ever knew was my grandfather, my mom's father. He was a farmer, German descendant. Again, this is Minnesota, right? And he and my grandmother had a very successful, loving marriage. And one thing I noticed was like whenever he would come home from working the land, he would go and take a shower and like shave again and put on his cologne and brush his hair and put on nice clothes that he would he would put on his Sunday clothes to have dinner at home with his wife and children. And I was always really impressed by that. Like, he had his farm clothes, and those were only out when he was outdoors. And when he was indoors, he was nicely dressed and nicely groomed because that's how he wanted to present himself to his wife and his family.
Wow. Yeah, it's nice when they care. It's really nice. I mean, speaking as a person who's a Leo and a Libra, because I have a Libra moon and I have a Leo sun, so I have a bit of both of these placements, and like we both of these placements care a lot about appearances. They care about, like, Leos will want the power couple, but Libras will not want to go for somebody who does not represent their aesthetic taste. They are not people, they're meticulous. They care about their grooming. They care about maintaining a certain sense of harmony, even in their appearance. Like, they are not the people who show up in sweatpants. You know what I mean? They care a lot about making sure that they are put together. So, but I also think that they're very efficient at mediating. That's where I think that that might be a flaw, like not a flaw, but like necessarily a downside of being a Libra. I think that in situations of conflict with their partners, they are more likely to just mediate and less likely to stand up for what they want. You have to really beware as a Libra to not be a people pleaser. I have it as a moon placement, and for a very long time, my childhood, I really struggled with that. And most of the time, it had to do with like just wanting to maintain the peace in my house because I just did not want to be in a loud, chaotic house. And so I just like would give in to what other people wanted, just not just to maintain the peace, but just to avoid conflict. And so you have to be careful with people, and like sometimes the conflict is not avoidable. Sometimes you need to actually advocate for what you want. And some Libras can do this and some Libras can't. Again, it's like their sign is one of the only signs that is not represented by a creature. It's represented by a fixed object. They're represented by the scales, which is not a real thing. They're the symbol of balance. you know and so they always, when they can sense that something is like going in a direction that is taking them off balance, they're very likely to rectify that situation by giving in to what other people want. And I think Libras need to learn to stand their ground, and they need to learn, and that's a very hard thing, because in FDS, like we say, you have to stand your ground, and if somebody can't meet it, you must walk away. So if I had to give an advice to Libra, that's what I'd say. I'm like, sometimes you cannot be the bigger person, sometimes you can't be the peacemaker.
Yeah, you can't make peace with Nazis, okay? You can't make peace with Nazis. And that's like something we cannot tolerate the intolerable. And that's a lesson.
Yeah, you cannot split the difference of the terrorist. You know what I mean? An emotional terrorist in this situation.
Right, exactly. And they tend to dot the landscape around here. Okay, so that's our dear Libra friend. Who do we move on to after our Libras?
Well, you know what? Libras, they bring this very chill and charismatic energy. They're usually very good with people and very social. And the next sign that we have is Scorpio. And Scorpio as a sign is a lot more intense. It's like such a big jump to go from Libra, Venusian, I'm sitting in my feminine energy kind of kind of sign, to Scorpio,
Yeah.
which is like, Scorpios have like the reputation for being very mysterious and very misunderstood. But also Scorpio is in the sign of, I believe, Neptune. And so they're ruled by Poseidon. But
Okay, is that War or Poseidon?
no, I think Neptune is Poseidon. But also in Greek mythology, they're associated with Hades and the underworld, because the Scorpio house that it rules has to do with the occult and has to do with death and transformation. And so, that's why Scorpios a lot of the time are represented by the symbol of death, essentially, because it doesn't have to, in this situation, it is ego death. In this situation, it is renewal. It's not a bad thing. Scorpio is all about getting to the bottom of things. They're kind of the investigator of the zodiac. They are people who cannot stand inauthenticity. They are not fake people. They want to know everybody deeply. They want to know people, like they want to know what makes people tick. And to some people, that can come off as really creepy and intense. You know what I mean? Because they don't have time for people who are faking it. They don't have time for people who are projecting images.
And these are social mores that, govern the landscape. And there is a certain amount of politesse that people expect. And I think when you are somebody who comes in with that sort of energy, like take no bullshit, none of this like small talk. A lot of people, that's how they're able to like dip their toes into getting to know you. If you just want to circumvent that often tends to trip off a warning for them, right?
Yes. I will say Scorpio has a very good intuitive energy. They're very good at sussing people out when they're in a room. They may be quiet and they may keep to themselves, but they are people who are always paying attention. And that's something they share with Virgo. They're people who are always paying attention to other people. So they don't like lack in the, I've observed this thing. Like a Scorpio is the kind of person who will clock a bad person way before anybody else has, just because of something minute they did. And they will keep that shit to themselves until the time is right to share that information with other people. Like they have a very good bullshit meter. And for that reason, they're much more quick on the picking up of red flags, you know? But at the same time,
Yeah, I was gonna say, but what else should we be on the lookout for then for our dear Scorpios as far as their dating lives?
Scorpios love deeply, okay? That super intense shit that they have for other people. When they love you, oh my God, you could murder people. And they're like, well, he was just having an off day at work, okay?
So almost to a point of obsessiveness and unhealthy fixation.
Codependence is Scorpio's issue, I would say. Okay, Scorpio is a sign that when they're outside of that codependency and they're just meeting you, they can probably suss you out really quick, because if they know that you're insincere about your affections for them, they lose interest very fast. They want somebody who's all in deeply. And so you have to be very careful to not attract love bombers or people who are trying to, you know, take advantage of the fact, hoodwink you into thinking that they are more committed than they actually are.
So Scorpios are very vulnerable to like con artists and scam. Okay.
Well, not necessarily con artists, but
love con artists.
The thing is, once they're attached, it's very hard for them to let go. You know what I mean? Like, they are people who love very deeply and want to be in a very, very intense love relationship with other people. They want like soul ties. You know what I mean? They don't like, they're not necessarily people who are like, I enjoy being in a casual situation. You know what I mean? Like, to them, even the casual situations are full of intensity. So you have to be careful not to run the risk of attracting men who are very devious and dubious and know how to manipulate the fact that you want something like this, because they can tell you the right things, and then once you're in it, it's very hard for you to let go. I'm not saying that they're forgiving people necessarily, because, you know, Scorpios also have a reputation for holding a grudge. In my experience, like, you know, because I have a lot of key friends who are Scorpios, and I think they're very powerful people. I get the sense from them that it's a very powerful sign, you know, being able to see this aspect of human life and being able to see what people really want, what people are actually all about. That is a gift. But I think that when you're inside of that bubble, you're blind. Like, you know, like that's the thing with every single zodiac sign, is they obviously all have blind spots, and their blind spot is, once they're in it, it's very hard for them to let go. They're very loyal, very, very loyal to the people that they love. And so even if they're being hurt, they might start making excuses for them and shit. You know what I mean? So you have to be very careful that like you really, really vet before you give that kind of energy to anyone, because once they're in it, it's very hard for them to extricate themselves out. So that's the thing about being associated with any level of intensity. Intensity requires a level of vulnerability that is not, you know, most men don't have that. Let's just start there. Most men don't have the kind of vulnerability that this sign is usually accustomed to and enjoys. You know, I remember like my Scorpio friend, like the first time I knew we were becoming really close friends was, she's the only person in my life who's ever sat me down being like, I want to know everything that's happened in your life that is important to you that I should know. And I was like, that is the strangest, most interesting question anybody's asked me, because nobody's ever asked me to sit them down and tell them what's happened. And I was like, well, now that you're asking me in